Hello there, hellos, and welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about Souls-likes as a whole, and whether or not I think they are becoming a bit more of a detrimental thing in the industry. The constant Souls-likes we've been getting, as you've probably seen, 2023, we've had the most Souls-likes I think I've ever seen released in a year, a single year. Games that are actually trying to be Souls-likes and trying to have... There's loads of games that have been coming out that have been trying to be like Dark Souls and, you know, trying to be like Bloodborne. And I think we have to talk about whether or not this is necessarily a good thing. Now, competition is always a good thing. It's always good having more companies coming along and trying to create games similar to Dark Souls. I think that's always a good thing. However, I do think there'd become a point... And there might be a point now, we might be at the point now, where it becomes a bit oversaturated. Now, playing Lords of the Fallen, the game definitely had flaws. There's a lot of issues with Lords of the Fallen. I made a big 25-minute video talking about all of my issues with Lords of the Fallen. But it still did, in a way, scratch that Dark Souls itch. It's still the closest thing we've gotten to a Dark Souls 4. There's a lot of issues with the game, but I still would say, despite my issues with the game, that there were still good things about it, and it was still very creative, and it still had some interesting levels and worlds and some decent-ish bosses, even if they did hit a little bit too hard for my personal liking. I still think there was a lot of good things in that game, you know, mainly visually. But there still were some good aspects of that game, and Lies of P I think is the main game I want to talk about here, where Lies of P was, in my personal opinion, the Bloodborne 2 I've always wanted to see. Literally, it's a fantastic game. The combat system is beautiful, playing the game feels amazing, and there are some issues in the back half of the game, where I'd say the back half of the game is not as good as the first half of the game, but it's still a very, very enjoyable game. Playing the game, running around as your character, taking on enemies, using the amazing combat system. I think there's so much in that game that is incredibly fun and very replayable. Even if it is very linear, it's still an incredible experience. And I think Lies of P is a statement that now there is definitely a second developer in the industry, Neowiz Games, who can create games that are of the quality of Dark Souls games, in my personal opinion. You know, I'd say it's better than Dark Souls 2. There's a possibility of it being better than Dark Souls 3 for me, personally, because Dark Souls 3 I don't like as much as many of the people. So I think Lies of P is definitely up there with the Souls franchise, and I think now we've got another developer setting their foot in the industry that can, you know, innovate and do some awesome things with the genre. The next game hopefully being a Wizard of Oz game. That's going to be awesome. And I love that idea, and I think there's so much cool things that we can see come out of that. I'm really excited for that. But there does have to be a time when we think, okay, are we potentially getting too many Souls-like games? Where it starts to feel oversaturated. Where the next time FromSoftware would come out with a game and say, oh yes, this is going to be Elden Ring 2, Electric Boogaloo. And we get this new game that looks like Elden Ring, and maybe they are doing something different. It's FromSoftware, they're always going to do something different. But if it's still going to be presenting bosses in a similar way, there are still only so many times in which you can have a boss fight, or, you know, this one's got 2 boss fights. This time, this boss gets wings. This time, there's a third phase on this boss fight. This time, the boss gets imbued with fire for the second phase. You know, there's only so many times in which you can do variations on the theme before it starts to sound the same. And that's the main thing which I want to make this video about, is I think there will probably come a point, especially with Souls-likes now becoming more of a thing than ever, where we're getting more Souls-likes, more games which are trying to be like Dark Souls and trying to do the thing that Dark Souls did. There will probably become a point where we don't want to see that anymore, you know? Like with Lords of the Fallen, when I was playing it, I was thinking, okay, this boss is basically like that one, isn't it, from Dark Souls 3? Okay, this boss is trying to be like that one from Elden Ring. This boss is trying to do this that we've seen in Bloodborne, you know? And there's comparisons constantly to be made as to bosses that we've seen before, but realistically, how many times can you do variations on a similar thing? Like I said, you know, before it ends up being just more of the same. And I made a video talking about how I wanted a Dark Souls 4, and how I really wanted to see another game made by FromSoftware in the Dark Souls franchise. And then I made another point saying, well, maybe we could get, you know, Bandai Namco building a team to make a Dark Souls 4, because Bandai Namco, obviously, they know a bit more what they're doing, don't they, than CI Games, for fuck's sake, with Lords of the Fallen, you know. So I said that. I said I would like to see another team go and build a Dark Souls 4, but spearheaded, well, not spearheaded, but trained by FromSoftware. So let's say Bandai Namco put together a team, then Hidetaka Miyazaki comes, oversees a Dark Souls 4. He's not directing it, but he's just making sure that it's going in the right path. He's giving the team some points, saying, okay, you know, you do this, you do that. I think it should be like this. This is sort of where I would take the story if I was doing it. You know, giving them some hints and things, trying up a little bit. Maybe even have a split team from FromSoftware go and, you know, work on it. But, you know, maybe expand FromSoftware, but then have, you know, a small little team working on more Dark Souls games. That's what I said before, anyway. And a part of me still wants that, because I love the Dark Souls franchise. I love everything it represents. The story, the world, the characters, everything about it. Even just the feeling of just sitting down at a bonfire and just leveling up. You know, there's just something amazing about that, which no game's ever going to capture for me personally, because I absolutely adore the franchise. But I do have to think, realistically, isn't it just going to be stuff we've already got now? You know? Like, I know Lords of the Fallen wasn't that amazing, but we've had something now which feels very similar to a Dark Souls 4, just with combat that's like Dark Souls 2 level, or a little bit worse than Dark Souls 2 level, you know. And I don't know. A part of me is just thinking maybe I don't necessarily want a Dark Souls 4 now, because we've got other games coming out which are trying to scratch that itch, and they're doing a decent job at it, even if it's not as good as it could have been. But Liza P is definitely doing a very good job at that. And a part of me thinks maybe we could get Neowiz. They will be the company making games that are more similar to Dark Souls now. And then FromSoftware can go and do their entire thing. Because I think now I would potentially prefer to see FromSoftware do their own thing. Because Armored Core 6 showed me that clearly, even though the game was nothing like Dark Souls really, it still had this feeling in it. The world, the combat, even though it was different, it still somehow managed to capture that a bit. And the world still, and just the storytelling that FromSoftware do, it just feels, it has this amazing quality to it, which I absolutely love. Even though, like I said, Armored Core 6 is going to be it's very, very far away from Dark Souls, but it still somehow capture that a bit. And I think I would like to see FromSoftware maybe do more their own thing then. You know, they can go and Hidetaka Miyazaki is thinking, I don't give a shit what you think, ChaosSoul, I'm doing my own thing anyway, I don't need you to tell me what to do. But I would like to see Hidetaka Miyazaki do his own thing, take FromSoftware and do their own thing. And then, you know, I think now, with some of these more recent Soulslikes that we've seen being of a higher standard than previous ones, you know, like Lords of the Fallen, it still was better than previous Soulslikes that we've seen. I think I'm more open to having that now. So they sort of, these developers that were clearly influenced by Dark Souls, they can carry the torch for a bit of Dark Souls and what Dark Souls was, and then FromSoftware can continue innovating and breathing new life into the genre and other things, you know. And you know, realistically, I think FromSoftware, they are talented enough to do another series that's just as good as Dark Souls, that reinvents the wheel and is a massive game-changing piece of art for the industry. You know, I think they're capable of doing that, and I would love to see what they do next, doing something different. You know, even though I do, and I will always hold a place in my heart for Dark Souls, I just don't want to see them come out with a game and everyone think, God, they're really going to do another Souls-like game? Jesus Christ, you know. I don't want that. I don't want us to get to the point where that happens, where we're just like, oh, they're, you know, FromSoftware, yeah, they'll always be the best at doing it, but I don't want to get to the point where they bring a game out and it's like, I'm loving it, but I've played a lot of Souls-like games and I could use something different, you know? I don't want to get to that point. So I would probably prefer to see them do something completely different that changes up the formula completely, and then have these regular developers, I don't want to say regular developers, that sounds a bit mean, doesn't it? But have these other inspired developers continue on the Souls legacy. So, if you enjoyed this video,
Let me know what you think down in the comments below. What do you think about this topic? And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, maybe share this video if it was good enough. Thank you again for watching. This is ChaosSoul signing out. Have a good one.